Well, before the pandemic, more than 40% of churches had never posted their service online. When it hit, many pastors had to navigate this new digital landscape on the fly. Well, media expert Phil Cooke has studied hundreds of these newly live streamed services, and he says there's a right way and, unfortunately, a wrong way to take the church online.
Phil Cooke is a media expert whose passion is helping churches, ministries, and nonprofits share their message in a media-driven culture. Phil says one positive aspect of the pandemic of 2020 is that pastors have come to realize the importance of online congregations. His latest book, Maximize Your Influence, is a manual for Christian leaders on how to use media to make their ministry most effective.
Well, Phil Cooke joins us now with more. And Phil, thank you for being here. Thank you for being with us.
Good greetings from Los Angeles. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
You're up early. Let's start. let's start with the money. I remember back in March, April, and May, hearing a lot of pastors talk about how donations had literally evaporated on them because they weren't having Sunday services. What would your advice be to churches who have seen a decline in income based on the pandemic? What should they do?
Well, there's no question that we need to take that audience seriously. That's a legitimate congregation out there. And I think a lot of pastors, I've even recently I've had pastors tell me, Phil, I don't mind live streaming my services, but that's not real ministry. Well, let me tell you, it is real ministry. And once we engage that audience and really, talk to them, suddenly they start to give. I've discovered all over the country that there are churches that are embracing this in a big way, and their giving has actually gone up. I had a pastor in Montgomery, Alabama, tell me recently, I actually feel guilty because I'm a pastor, but I have no desire to go back into our building. We're making more of an impact online than we've ever made in the history of our church. So pastors that are embracing this are finding really, really interesting results.
I'm hearing that they're actually increasing their audience and increasing the congregation that is showing up when they're having social distance services on Sundays. Is that what you're hearing?
You know what? I've been working with churches for years with their live streaming, and I've never seen one indication that people will stop coming to your church when you put it online. In every case, it actually has grown the congregation. So there's no question that it's a positive thing for churches, particularly in this digital culture that we live in today.
Well, what would your advice be to a pastor who says, well, I've been to seminary, I know theology, I know how to preach a sermon, but I don't know anything about digital. What should be his first step?
Well, that's exactly why I wrote the book, because seminaries, Bible colleges, they teach great stuff about preaching and running a church and counseling, but they don't teach anything about living in this media-driven culture we live in today. So I think start simple. Your church website is really an important hub to communicate with your community. I think social media, it's free. And yet it has an extraordinarily exponential impact on inviting people to church. I'm baffled that pastors don't get up in the pulpit every Sunday and just say, hey, if you've enjoyed this service, if you love our church, talk about it on social media, share it. And you'd be amazed at how they share it, their friends share it. Suddenly, the impact is growing in that community, and it could have a really positive thing for churches.
One of the things I miss about church is the praise and worship. And the group experience of that. How can that be replicated online?
Well, I don't think we're ever going to, stop coming to church. I think people love the fellowship. They love getting together. But I always tell pastors, don't just duplicate what you did in the service online. Adapt. Maybe make some changes, particularly in states where we're not able to come to church at all, which in California and parts of New York, that's still the case. And I always tell pastors, maybe you don't stand in the pulpit. Maybe we don't have the worship team up front. Maybe we go to a different room. Maybe we go like I am today, sitting at a bistro table with a tall stool. It's how we engage the audience. And so we need to adapt to when that audience is on the other side of a camera. That really changes the dynamic when it comes to a worship service.
Well, one of the things you point out in your book is the necessity to have a brand. And you even point out Martin Luther had a brand. What would you say to a pastor who says, what do you mean, a brand for my church, brand for my message?
Great question. That's a great question. A brand is really your perception. It's the story that surrounds your church. I always tell people, what do people think of when they think of your church? What do they think of when they think of you as a pastor? That story is important. And if we don't tell that story, if we don't express it well, we'll spend the rest of our lives at the mercy of other people who will. So do you want you want the local media? Do you want your critics? Do you want other people telling the story about your church or your ministry? Or do you want to tell that? That's really what branding is, really telling your story in a positive way that changes people's perception.
What would you say to pastors that say, I don't have the budget for this, I can't possibly hire a creative team, I'm operating bare bones as it is. How should they get started?
You have a powerful tool in your pocket. It's called a phone. These things, they're amazing. In fact, there are 2 film festivals now in the United States for movies produced on iPhones. So you can't tell me you don't have a budget. Just use this. I know one church that just literally taped their phone to a board and started live streaming their services that way. So there's some very simple ways you can live stream on YouTube for free, on Facebook. So it doesn't cost much to do it.
Well, I'll tell you something else that doesn't cost much. Maximize your influence, how to make digital media work for your church. It's a great place to get started. I encourage you to get Phil's latest book. Phil, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.